Attention everyone. It is now H hour minus 10 minutes.
Between 1945 and 1976, the United States detonated 588 nuclear devices, 183 of them in the atmosphere. In all, 300,000 military personnel participated in the tests. This test in the Nevada desert was filmed by the Department of Defense to demonstrate that when it came to military preparedness, America was second to none.
7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
There it goes. You feel the heat of it 8 miles away.
It's an experience that you'll never ever forget. It's just like all hell breaks loose, and the ground picks up and starts rolling, and the light is so bright it goes off like a camera lens clicking in the air, and then you see a fireball start up, and then you hear an explosion, and then the ground picks up and starts rumbling. It creates an earthquake. There's this enormous windstorm, a lot of dust, and it just, you can feel the pressure of the bomb exploding on your face. I mean, it puts pressure, it'll knock you down.
Between February and May 1955, Howard Hinkey participated in 17 of the Nevada tests. Since the tests, his wife has suffered 3 miscarriages and has given birth to 2 children with genetic defects. One did not survive infancy.
And they just sent me to...
The South Pacific in the spring and summer of 1962. Jing King witnessed 27 nuclear tests near Christmas Island while aboard the USS Forester.
Every day it seemed like, or every other day, it seemed like a bomb and another one, and another one, and another one. And this went on for quite a few months. One of the bombs hit too close to the ship. We went dead in the water. We were drawn back towards ground zero. We lost all power. The ship went dark. When radio communications was finally established, another ship had been trying to contact us for about 30 minutes or longer. They had been reporting the USS Forester had been sunk.
King's medical problems began just after the tests. He has had surgery to remove a tumor from his colon, has a preset of cancer in the bladder, degeneration in the discs of his back, and is rapidly losing his eyesight. King and Hinkey are among 1,000 veterans of the atomic tests who have petitioned the Veterans Administration for service-connected disabilities. Only 12 of the claims have been awarded. Nearly half are being pressed through rehearings. Some have gone to the courts. Louis Golinker from American University is representing many of the veterans.
They generally feel they're second-class citizens because they cannot get the full measure of relief that's provided to any other class of citizen. They think that the Veterans Administration has let them down, and they feel that the Defense Nuclear Agency is doing everything possible to see that they do not get benefits. And
the veterans are claiming their exposure to radiation at the time of the nuclear test is affecting their health and the health of their children.
We were always told that it was safe, and we were in the service, and in the service they tell you to do something, and you usually go and do it. If you don't, you find out that you should have.
I went in at blind faith. I knew that my government could do no wrong. I knew if something happened that they would look after me. They would take care of me.
Major Dale Keller of the Defense Nuclear Agency denies that the atomic tests were responsible for the veterans' health problems.
There was a great deal of concern for the personal safety of each individual participant. And specifically, the individuals were not exposed to the initial radiation that occurred from the blast. The individuals who were involved in maneuvers always maneuvered upwind from the blast. This was not a concern to test the individuals, but rather to test the design of the weapon.
Glenn Caldwell of the Center for Disease Control has just completed a study of one series of nuclear tests showing a significantly increased leukemia rate among test participants.
Once we began to look at the group, it became fairly evident early on that there did appear to be more leukemias than one would expect by chance alone. Certainly now, at this late date, we know that you would expect about 3.5 cases of leukemia in a population if it were just like any other group of people this age, race, sex in the United States, and we found 9. a clear increase. Individuals who are exposed to high doses of radiation do have an increased risk for cancer and leukemia. The one common factor among this group of GIs is the fact that they were in the desert, they were exposed to a nuclear test.
But to collect disability, a veteran must show more than a statistical relationship. He must prove that his disease began while he was in the service.
A typical VA denial will be, you provided evidence to establish your disability and were unconvinced. Therefore, you lose.
If you look at the individuals from Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the nuclear bombs were dropped on only 2 particular days. The evidence for an increased risk for leukemia did not show up till 3, 4, 5 years later, and as far as some of the solid tumors, not until 10 or 15 years later.
They take a rabbit and they pull a test on a rabbit, and they keep paperwork on that rabbit all along. And it tells how's that rabbit's acting. I was rabbit. Nobody kept no paperwork on me, it seems.
As I left the operating room, I finally went back to my bed, and I lay in my rack crying. And I thought, my God, this is your reward for serving your God and your country for 20 years.
California Representative Norm Mineta is leading a fight in the Congress to help atomic veterans receive their disability benefits.
Pointed at, the federal government doesn't want to be pointed at as accepting the liability, and what they're saying is, well, go ahead and take the normal course of filing your claim and we'll make a decision. If you don't like the decision, you appeal it. Well, in the meantime, the person's gone through a great deal of costs. The resources of an individual can't match the federal government in any way, and yet these people have a medical problem. It's not being addressed, and I'm saying, let's knock that all off and deal with the issue of this person.
I think there's a lot of sick people out there that need help and aren't getting it from their government.
How can you put a price on your eyes, your heart, your kidneys, your lungs? How can you put a price on your shipmates? How can you put a price on your kids' lives?
We asked them to help us when we needed their help, and I think the federal government ought to go ahead and help them when they need our help.
What you've just seen is an atomic explosion. Between 1945 and 1962, thousands of military men were involved in such nuclear weapons testing. Officials of the National Association of Atomic Veterans say there are approximately 1,500 Alabama servicemen or their families who are suspected to be suffering from the long-range effects. O.T. Weeks is a state representative for atomic vets.
No one has really tried to reach these people, not even the federal government, and to come forward with all that have problems. And so we are seeking these and looking for them and hoping that we can bring them forth and make them aware that there is some help that can be obtained.
Wanda Kelly is co-founder of the National Atomic Vets Office. Her husband was assigned to atomic weapons testing in the Army. He died last year of cancer.
We feel since our men gave their lives to serve their country in a time for need, if it was to protect our country, then now it's time for the government to look out for their families.
Weeks and Kelly urge all atomic vets and their family members to seek prompt medical attention. Tomorrow, Weeks and Kelly will meet with all area atomic vets who are interested in forming a local atomic vet chapter.
Development, August 21st, 1981, signed by Governor Fob James and Ernest Todd, Chairman of Alabama Rural Development Council.
The Bear-Bryant law passed during the regular session of the legislature earlier this year. It basically gives the University of Alabama Board of Trustees the right to exclude anyone they wish from the mandatory retirement age of 70, namely football coach Bear Bryant. The first suit against the law was filed on behalf of the Teachers Retirement System's Board of Control, but because the system's attorney technically worked for the Attorney General, the suit was dismissed when Charlie Graddick said he hadn't okayed the suit. But now, Dr. Bronner has filed a similar suit in his own name. Bronner contends there are two problems with the law. He says, first, it blatantly provides one group of retirement system members, the University Board of Trustees, with an option not available to the other members. He says because it doesn't provide the option equally to all members, it's unconstitutional. Secondly, he says the situation could lead to the retirement system losing its tax-exempt status on the millions of dollars in investment income each year. As for Bryant, he has said before he is upset about the hoopla the law created, which was intended to let Bryant continue coaching reportedly until he breaks the college football record for the most career victories. Bronner says he's not trying to prevent the coach from reaching his goal, saying there are other ways to allow Bryant to coach and at the same time not violate the integrity of the teachers' retirement system. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Joe and Mary Buzzard spent hours upon hours writing letters, making phone calls, doing anything that might help Valentina's family leave the Soviet Union.
Joe, how did you and your wife and your family become involved with Valentina and her family who were in the Soviet Union?
Well, before we moved to Montgomery, it was around 1978. I think we had seen a lot of things on TV about Vietnamese children and this sort of thing, and we had talked about adopting a Vietnamese child. And my wife saw an article in the Montgomery Advisor, and when I came home, we had discussed the article that had to do with the Russian Jewish people, and we just decided to get involved with it.
Our contact with the Soviets has completely changed our life for the last three years.
The reason why I'm smiling because I didn't know any language, and I thought we will not be able to communicate at all. And Marichka doesn't know Russian, Joe doesn't know Russian either. So when Marichka came, we did communicate, and as she said, something clicked between us, and we communicated because she could feel my feelings and I could feel hers, and I think that was one of the reasons why our relationship's growing to love, and we can't live as a family as we do.
You mentioned a while ago that you feel like she is your daughter. You have a son, and you mentioned your feelings for her earlier.
We had thought about adopting a child earlier. We have a son, and we wanted a daughter. We thought in terms of a 3 to 6 month old daughter. So it was quite a surprise for my husband when our daughter turned out to be 20 years old. But I don't think if we had raised this one ourselves that she could have turned out any better.
Mary has written Alabama Congressman Bill Dickinson, who has been actively involved in helping several Soviet Jews. Recently, Representative Dickinson addressed his fellow members of Congress on the plight of the Jews.
What keeps you going? What keeps you striving?
Because I love the learners.
How long will you continue in your efforts on their behalf?
Until they're right here.
In the meantime, Valentina Edelman is happy as anyone could be, considering she is so far from a real family, and considering the possibility that she may never see any of them again.
I didn't miss the life there.
Would you go back? Would you go back if you could, to live?
No, not at all. I missed my friends and relatives, of course, but I wouldn't go back.
Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
The Florida Gators made one of the all-time turnarounds in Southeastern Conference football history.
In 1979, they were no wins, 10 losses, and a tie. Last year, they won 8 and lost only 4, including a victory over Maryland in the Tangerine Bowl. Of course, that has people excited around here. That's the good of it. The bad of it is that 2 of those losses were to in-state rivals Miami and Florida State. And also, Coach Charlie Pell sincerely believes his team is yet a year away.
Well, we're a year away from having the experience that a great football team has, and just the offensive line alone. We're so green there. We only have 1 player on the first unit right now that has had playing experience. The rest of them are going to be newcomers and freshmen and sophomores, and in the Southeastern Conference, that's not what it takes to be called a preseason contender.
The Gators have most of their offensive and defensive units back from last year, so they can realistically entertain some thoughts of a conference championship. Of course, if that happens, it will be the first ever conference championship for the Florida Gators. It will be tough, however. They have some tough games. They have Mississippi State and LSU in successive weeks on the road early in the season. Late in the season, they have to go on the road to play Georgia and Auburn. That will also be very tough. There is one advantage. They don't have to play Alabama. On the SEC Skywriters Tour, this is Phil Snow reporting from Gainesville, Florida.
They also see their lawyer before they see you. Of course, that's not really the way to do it, but that's the way so that you start observing these people from the moment that they come in. And you start looking at them in terms of body build, general posture, and the deformities or distortions that are apparent.
Now, I want you to feel like that this is your, keep them that way. If you'll work with us in helping keep this a beautiful facility like it is, like we've had now. Will be good for you. We believe, just as the Bible says, that train up a child in the way he should go, and when he becomes older, he won't depart from it. Wholesome, Dennis. We won't keep you much longer. Friends of this community.
The walk to the state capitol will be the last for ERA supporters. The marchers, who say they're still gaining nationwide support, had something to cheer about as they began the last leg of trying to get the Equal Rights Amendment passed. The bill is only 3 states away from ratification. Alabama is one of 17 states that hasn't voted in favor of the amendment. The rally took place on what was supposed to be Women's Equality Day in Alabama, but supporters say Governor James never signed their proclamation. On the Capitol steps, all speakers reiterated their stand, saying passage of the Equal Rights Amendment is vital.
One of the things that strikes me as very curious is that President Reagan and our own good Senator Denton pretend to be so very concerned about the protection of women and mothers. It is time that we sent the message to Washington and made it very clear that we are concerned about our own protection, and the best way to protect us is to pass the ERA and get it ratified in all 50 states.
ERA supporters say they face 2 tests on this final stretch. One comes in June of next year. That's the deadline for the bill's ratification. The other comes in November, when women, whom supporters say are gaining tremendous voting strength, go to the polls to elect state officials. And supporters say they won't vote for the party that won't support them. Kim Davis, WSFA, TV News.
Some of us that have been in this thing, for many, many years.
We brought one.
Let's see, we went around. Let's see, where were we now when we Cooper Brown. The biggest problem that most of them are running into first is when they file a claim, and if their medical records exist and were not burned or partially burned, they first look at the records and say there's no indication on your record that you were ever exposed to atomic radiation. And this is the first thing that they will throw at you. And then in the early years, when I was fighting for my case to get it established, they said, okay, you prove it. You prove you were there. The government did not offer to help anyone in any way. They since then have changed their viewing a little bit, and they will help an individual establish proof to some extent that they were at a certain test series.
About 3,500 people are at the Civic Center this afternoon to listen to country music, eat, socialize, and help the former governor celebrate his 62nd birthday. The organizer for the event, former state treasurer Annie Laurie Gunter, says former Wallace staffers and friends throw a birthday party for him each year.
But this year we had so many requests from people from all over the state to let's do something for Governor Wallace's birthday. So we just came up with the idea of having an old-fashioned covered dish supper, and it's really, I think, been very successful. Everybody seems to be having a grand time. We've got wonderful entertainment, and everybody has donated their time and their talents, and it's just nothing really except to wish him a happy birthday.
Earlier in the afternoon, when Wallace arrived, he was greeted with a round of applause. Then he was surrounded by people, shaking hands, signing pictures, and exchanging greetings. Wallace refuses to commit himself one way or the other on the issue of re-election, but he says his political message is as viable today as it was in the 1960s and 70s. And though the Wallace buttons, pins, and pictures are reminiscent of the campaign trail, Ms. Gunter insists it's still just a party.
I'm sure that he doesn't plan any announcement at this time. I don't know what his plans are about running. I really don't. I don't think anybody knows. And but he, more than anybody else that I have ever known, is able to feel the pulse of the people and know what the people are thinking. And I'm sure that that decision, he'll make it at the proper time.
Wallace's birthday is actually next Tuesday, but to the thousands of well-wishers today at the Civic Center, it doesn't seem to matter. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News. The three-time former governor was greeted with applause and surrounded by well-wishers when he arrived at the party this afternoon. He shook hands, signed pictures, and kissed babies, but declined to commit himself to another campaign. Wallace has been saying he doesn't have any political plans for the next year, but he says he won't back himself into a corner by saying he won't run. Wallace did use the occasion to praise Alabama's past influence on national politics.
The people of Alabama did more through me as your estimate, you doing it, not me, to change the political thinking of the American people more than the people of any other state in this union.
Wallace acknowledged speculation about his possible candidacy, which some people say his health won't permit, a charge he denies.
Well, I don't have anything else to say. I see the newspapers here, and I think they expected a political speech, but I'll just let them keep on guessing, you know, let them do some talking. I'm still alive and kicking.
The afternoon was filled with country music, dancing, food, and more than one chorus of Happy Birthday. After it was over, many present said they hope Wallace does decide to run again.
If he ran for governor, would I vote for him? I think I would. Yes, sir, definitely.
I think he's been the best governor we ever had. And I just hope he runs again.
I think he's great. He's always been good to the young people, tried to involve them in the politics.
I think the governor should run.
For now, whether or not Wallace will choose to enter the next gubernatorial race is anyone's guess. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
Klansmen from across the Southeast don their robes in Montgomery tonight for what they're calling the first of what could be annual or biannual unification rallies. James Patterson, leader of the Ku Klux Klans of America, headquartered in Wetumpka, organized the rally to quell allegations that independent Klan factions couldn't get along together.
Some of the other clans, we've got different opinions on different things, and that's what we're here to iron out.
Patterson's rally drew about 150 Klan members. The leaders who will take part in the talks to reach a unified philosophical point of view included Grand Wizards from Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama. In addition to calling for unification among the clans, the speakers continued their verbal attacks on blacks and Jews. Roger Handley of the Invisible Empire, the KKK in Birmingham, accused most politicians of being blind to their cause and suggested they be replaced.
We'll arrest them at sundown, try them at midnight, and hang them at sunrise.
Tennessee Grand Wizard Tex Moore suggested Klansmen gain control through the voting booth and put what he called a God-fearing Klansman in the White House in 1984. The half-dozen Grand Wizards are going into what might be called a closed-door executive session to work on a common philosophical stand for these factions to follow in an effort to, as they put it, show the world that they're willing to work together, fight together, and if necessary, die together. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Well, I think we may have to fool them a little bit more than what we've done in the past. As far as our defense, it'll be basically the same. Our offense will probably go back to what it's been in years past, a little bit more split backs, veer offense, whereas last year, because of the team we had, we ran more I formation than what we've been running in the past.
If you had to single out a couple of players that you're looking for leadership to help this team, who would they be?
Well, I know that some of our boys have worked awfully hard in the off-season. I know that Tim Lloyd, a linebacker, spent an awful lot of time in the weight room. Steve Holloway, a tight end. Curtis Stewart, a running back. These, just to mention two or three, that worked really hard during the summer, and we hope that they're going to give us the leadership that we need.
Hospital officials say the two men then ordered the nurses to lie on the floor and remain quiet. Officials say one of the men held the nurses at gunpoint, while the other then went directly down the hall to one of the rooms and stabbed a patient. Officials aren't releasing the name of the victim, who was admitted earlier this month for multiple gunshot wounds. The man is currently in satisfactory condition. Officials say his roommate was roughed up a bit, but not seriously. After the incident, the three men left on the employee's elevator, where it stopped on the 5th floor, apparently to let on a hospital employee. Authorities say that's where the suspects got off and left the hospital via stairway. Police were called to the scene and combed the area.
They sealed the building from the outside. They had a special forces unit here. They then searched the building from bottom to top to be sure that the suspects were not still in the building.
Hospital officials say the men apparently planned the attack because they knew exactly where to go and how to get there. Kim Davis, WSFA TV News.
Some of the other clans, we've got different opinions on different things, and that's what we're here to iron out.
We'll arrest them at sundown, try them at midnight, and hang them at sunrise.
There is eternal hope here at Vanderbilt. The Commodores have not won a conference game in the last 30. George McIntyre in his first year won 1 game. Last year, he won 2. But his plan to recruit the superior student who is also the superior athlete, he says, is right on schedule.
Yeah, that type of guy is looking for Vanderbilt University to come around and find them. You know, we just need to do a lot of searching to find these guys, and I'm very impressed with that idea. It's taken me a while to really get used to doing it that way. I've never just gone out 100% like that. So it's a good plan. We just got to work harder to do it.
Okay, with that class and with what you have here, do you have enough players to break through into the conference this year and win some more games?
Well, I hope so. I certainly feel like we've got a better football team right now than we had this time last year. I don't think there's any question. We're so much stronger than we were. You know, I used to worry about us just getting completely annihilated, and we're a little bit stronger to the point that I don't think we'll just get flattened by people that are just that much stronger than us. And that's encouraging because I didn't feel that way the last 2 years.
Vanderbilt's first 3 conference games are Mississippi State, Alabama, and Georgia. A breakthrough there doesn't appear likely. Ole Miss, Kentucky, and Tennessee come later on in the year. A victory over one of that 3 and 3 wins for the season would be a great accomplishment for Vanderbilt, and doubtless would help them sell some tickets for their shiny new stadium, which will be completed for the opening game. Tomorrow night at 6, we report on the defending national champions of college football, the Georgia Dogs. From Nashville, Tennessee, on the SEC Skyriders Tour, this is Phil Snow reporting.
Dr. Porter, for the past 8 years, you've been executive director of the Alabama Commission on Higher Education, and during that time, a great deal of legislation came out of this commission. What do you consider to be the high points during your term in office?
Well, Cassandra, the last 8 years have had a lot of high points in them. I'd start back at probably the beginning. In 1973, the Commission's recommendations for funding for the first time in the state were based on a formula, that is, on what institutions actually do, and recognized the differences in the cost of doctoral education compared to undergraduate education, differences that should be recognized in funding of institutions. So I think that was a major step, a major improvement in funding of higher education for the Commission to make their recommendations based on this kind of a process of need and logic. That was done, as I said, first in '73, and had a strong relationship to all appropriations up through about 1976, '77, when the state started having shortfalls of money or decreased growth. So number one, in the funding aspect, I would say was a major accomplishment. In the 75, the Commission adopted what's called now Planning Document Number 1, which I think for the first time gave some unified guidance to what was perceived to be the growth of the higher education sector in the next 5 years. Planning Document Number 1 laid down categories of institutions for planning purposes and made some recommendations for the future. But mostly importantly, it served as policy for the commission and the institutions for the intervening years. If I could summarize the major accomplishment, it is that no longer do institutions submit budget requests that they can't totally justify. They are all totally justifiable and are given great thought and careful consideration before they're submitted.
Are these scrutinized by the staff?
Yes. But in the past, before 1972, budget requests were kind of rule of thumb, ask for 50% more than you think you can get, and that's about the way the game was played. Now, everything they ask for, they can make a strong justification for, whether they receive the funds or not. In the area of program development, prior to 72, in the Commission's real strong beginning steps, new programs were initiated without a great deal of thought and without a great deal of planning as to what the long-range costs were going to be. Now, every program that's brought before the Commission has been thoroughly discussed on campus. Everybody knows all of the repercussions, and they are, again, carefully planned out. I think those are really the two major benefits that have occurred during the past 8 years.
Very soon the legislature will come back for yet another special session, this time to discuss education reform. What do you feel AIC's responsibility and role should be as far as higher education?
The first thing that I believe that should be done is to remove the confirmation of the executive director by the Senate. That was a major feature of the legislation which failed to pass in the regular session. I believe that to be essential. There was a provision included for giving the Commission the authority to review and terminate existing programs in the bill which failed to pass. I think that is a needed authority that the Commission should have. Some of the language in terms of off-campus authorities for the Commission should be clarified. Some of the fuzziness in language should be eliminated. And I believe the Commission should have the complete authority on off-campus, both new and existing, for all levels of post-secondary education. And if there be in anybody's mind a question about the jurisdiction of the Commission versus the State Board of Education, then that should be resolved also.
Do you feel that the State Board's jurisdiction over junior colleges should be taken away?
No, I think that the State Board should be the governing board of the junior colleges and tech colleges. Now, the Commission has adopted a plan which says that they should have a separate governing board. So I'm going to just say that they should have separate control, whether it's the State Board or somebody else. If it remains with the State Board, there should be a more direct line of authority over the two-year institutions. But the real point is that they are the governing board for the two-year institutions, and they stand just like Board of Trustees of the University of Alabama or Auburn or Jacksonville, Troy, or what have you. It's not a question of taking the authorities of a governing board from them. It's simply a matter of the necessary coordinating powers that the Commission should have, as they do with the universities. And it is poor thinking or cloudy thinking to think that the two-year sector of post-secondary education can be separated from the four-year sector, because they're all attempting to educate the same age group and the same programs, and the efforts have to be coordinated. Otherwise, you have total confusion about articulation between junior colleges and universities, and many other examples of uncoordinated activity.
Well, then what will the commission's authority be as far as junior colleges are concerned?
Well, it would be the same, and these are recognized at the present time by the State Board. As far as new programs are concerned, all new instructional programs would be submitted to the Commission for review and approval before implementation. That's not a problem. The State Board and State Department's doing that now.
Police say on August 3rd, Franklin was shot 5 times in a drug-related incident. He was treated at Baptist Medical Center, but police say Franklin didn't press charges against his assailants, and whether the shooting incident and stabbing are related, police aren't sure. But police are sure more arrests are expected.
If we can get the victim to cooperate with us and furnish their names, and we believe we can, then certainly we'll try to effect the arrest as quickly as possible.
Police are expected to interview Franklin later. In the meantime, he's under police protection in an undisclosed section of the hospital. Kim Davis, WSFA, TV News.
And what do you have in front of you, the total usage in kilowatt hours of the residential section? El Paso Electric.
Selma, Alabama is a town with a heritage dating back to the 1700s. Today, part of that heritage came home after a 118-year absence. Senator Denton intervened last week on behalf of the people of Selma who have been trying in recent years to get the cannon back from the Navy.
Because I'm an Alabamian and I admire what Selma's doing, and the cannon was made in Selma. I'm kind of a war between the states buff. And having been a former naval officer, it was my good fortune to have some rapport with John Lehman, the secretary, who was very receptive to my efforts.
In the ceremony preceding the unveiling, Denton told the cannon's history. The 7-inch Brooke cannon, capable of firing a 300-pound projectile over 4 miles, was made at the Selma Naval Ordnance Works back in 1863. It was shipped to Mobile, where it was mounted on the Confederate warship Tennessee. When the Tennessee was captured less than a year later, the cannon was taken and shipped to the U.S. Naval Yard in Washington, D.C. And there it stayed until last week when it was loaded onto a train for home. The cannon is on a 2-year loan from the Navy to the city, but Selma officials are trying to work out a permanent arrangement to keep the cannon in their town. Denton calls the cannon a symbol of the nobility of spirit of those men who fought in the Civil War, both for the North and the South. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News in Selma.
The State Board of Education is well on its way toward improving the quality of education in Alabama, so says State School Board Assistant Superintendent Dr. C.C. Baker. Dr. Baker explains some of the background leading up to the current teacher certification tests, which were taken for the first time this past June. Dr. Baker says the State Board's action to improve teacher education and certification didn't just start recently, but is the direct result of a 1972 board resolution. That resolution put greater emphasis on teacher competency by placing more teachers in their field of training, upgrading certification requirements, and by requiring colleges and universities to improve their teacher preparation programs for board approval. Dr. Baker says some other items leading up to the certification test include the ACT test requirement score of 16 before entering a teacher education program, and the requirement that prospective teachers maintain a certain grade point average. He says despite some of the problems and criticisms of education, the public continues to have faith and trust in the system. After Dr. Baker's speech, Montgomery School Superintendent Henry Adair challenged the teachers to do their best this year by continuing their professional development by going back to school and attending the school system's 5 in-service meetings. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
Fresh from a special session which saw a budget isolation reform measure pass, Governor James was quite optimistic about at least his next special session. Feeling he has the upcoming election as leverage to keep politicians facing the issues, James acts as if he has the upper hand in this last quarter of his administration.
When was the last time you heard of a real reform gut issue introduced to the Alabama legislation?
I've enjoyed immensely the 2.5 years I've been down here, but I think I'll enjoy the next 12 months 10 times as much as I have in the first couple of years.
Still mum about his political future, the governor appeared pleased at indications that Republican Montgomery Mayor Emory Farmer may be contemplating running for the governor's chair.
He's a crackerjack, even though he is in the wrong party.
The next special session is tentatively set for mid-September. Governor James says if legislators aren't ready to reapportion their districts, then he'll probably include some ideas on how best to use the more than $400 million in one-time oil lease money.
My views are very simple. Not one dime for operations. Every penny for capital improvements.
But the governor says there are many complicated technical and legal issues to be resolved. Chris Grimshaw, WSFA TV News.
Add to it at all.
The indications where this would be
Already underway. You're familiar with the part that, well, you know, the Attorney General was involved in some of the initial investigations. And all conversations will be kept in strict confidence, and any parolees who provide information will not have their paroles revoked and will not be prosecuted for paying for their own paroles.
I would say that we're regaining our perspective now. You can't let something like an order by a little pipsqueak dictator to stay out of a huge gulf interfere with the right of freedom of the seas, with law. He's just violating international law. I think the President of the United States was correct to go over there and make his presence evident to the world. I think we were correct to shoot down 2 aircraft which attacked ours, and I believe the country in general feels that way.
The Skyriders have been privileged to visit the home of the national champion for the last 3 years in a row. The Georgia Bulldogs are defending the title this year, but as Vince duly noted, not with the same team. We ask him the difference.
Well, this team differs in that it does not have the experience of last year's team. When we started out a year ago, we were a grown football team almost because we had a great number of seniors. This team, youth will be the theme throughout. Youth will be this theme on defense, where we've got 7 new faces starting, including an entirely new secondary.
The Dogs will have the most celebrated freshman in the history of college football back. That, of course, is tailback Herschel Walker. Herschel is now playing for the University of Georgia and Lloyd's of London. He has that $1 million insurance policy against injury. And they have the winningest quarterback in the league, Buck Bellew, who just seems to get better and better under pressure. What they don't have are the keys to their kicking game. Rex Robinson, the best place kicker in the country, and Scott Werner, the best punt returner. These two, plus some deficiencies in the offensive line and the secondary, make the Dogs something of a question mark. But maybe the most glaring deficiency is the absence of Irk Russell. Dooley's defensive brain trust is gone. 17 years he spent here at Georgia organizing the defensive unit. Now he's at Georgia Southern organizing a new football team. Dooley will miss Irk. He won't have the complete team he had last year. The national championship may be unrealistic, but a challenge for the Southeastern Conference title is still very possible. Tennessee is next. We'll report on them tonight at 10. This is Phil Snow reporting on the SEC Skyriders Tour from Athens, Georgia. Johnny Majors had all the credentials when he came home to the University of Tennessee. He was an All-American player here. As a coach, he had revived programs at Iowa State and at Pittsburgh. And of course, we all remember Tony Dorsett and his national championship at the University of Pittsburgh. Now, Majors is in his 5th year here at Tennessee. The record is 21 wins, 23 losses, 1 tie. You'd have to call that disappointing given the credentials of the coach and the tradition of the school.
I'm disappointed our record is not more outstanding, but and I'm not going to sit up here and make any excuses about it, but there are reasons. We've had a few high points that they hadn't had here in a few years, but also we've had a few low points. Believe it or not, there were more good football players on the job I had prior to this when we took it from a 1-10 team than we had when I took the job here from a 6-5 team. We had a chance to get on we were on the right schedule up until about mid-season last year, and we ran into a roadblock. So we've got to try to get around that roadblock and get back on the right track this year. And it won't be easy. We're younger than what we were. We have a few better young football players than what we've had, but we're hurting as far as experience goes in a few places.
Johnny Majors isn't circling the wagons yet. He has a 5-year contract. But you don't get a feeling of optimism around here this year. Of course, that could change with a victory over Georgia in that season opener. Tomorrow night, we report from the University of Kentucky in Lexington. This is Phil Snow on the SEC Skyriders Tour in Knoxville, Tennessee.
And when we responded, found that a fire was well developed on the 2nd level up here at Department Department C10, and found the fire was confined to the bedroom, upstairs bedroom, and into the attic portions of the building. "20-year-old Alphonse Cook and 20-year-old Alphonse was treated at the scene and transported to Jackson's emergency room. And found the fire was confined to the bedroom, upstairs bedroom, and into the attic portions of the building. And after firemen, they were in the process of extinguishing the fire, they discovered 20-year-old Alphonse Cook and 3-year-old Kevin Tiller. Kevin Tiller was dead.
Terms and conditions set out in Option Purchase Real Estate dated August 22nd, 1972.
Fell to the particular importance to the quality of the proposed interchange in exchange for land to escape the effects of that erosion. Consideration
Purchase in exchange for Shepherd.
Not have convenient access. The line has it. Dr. Thunberg, gentlemen, when Auburn University acquired property for Fort Shepherd and Mary Ann Shepherd in 1974.
It was the second time for members of the West Side Improvement Association to come before the County Commission, asking for relief from the drainage and erosion problems on the Cahaba Road, Hamilton Circle, Gaddy's Court, Ashley, Hunter Loop, and the Old Selma roads. The group also wants the county to maintain the Magnolia and Hamilton roads and reopen the Cahaba Road all the way to Hamilton Circle. Since the delegation's first appearance last week, the commission members have gone out to look at some of the area's problems firsthand, and the county engineer has started to work on improving the drainage. After some discussion, the commission decided to maintain the Magnolia and Hamilton roads, but took no action on the Cahaba Road because there's some question of who owns it. One of the residents says the road used to be a county road, but the deed was returned to one of the landowners almost 100 years ago. County Commissioner Frank Bray says he'll talk with the residents to discuss the issue. In the meantime, group spokesman James Hall says he'll look into the possibility of getting revenue sharing money to pay the ditches on the Old Selma Road to relieve the flooding and erosion problems in that area. Cassandra Taylor, WSFA TV News.
To improve the welfare system's capacity to take care of the truly needy. That is, have succeeded in giving poor people a hand out. We may be suffering some deterioration in the appreciation for the work ethic. Yes, sir.
Is required. For the last 2 decades, our country's attempt to turn poverty would have no resources to give to her poor. All citizens would be poor. Further, the nation would be defenseless against foreign takeover for the poor who are able-bodied and able-minded. A society concerned with poverty must not only create safety nets,
anything. That's one purpose.
Denton says the hearing is an investigation to determine which social programs are most effective in eliminating poverty. Before the meeting started, Denton said a priority of the committee will be to encourage those welfare recipients who can support themselves to do so.
You can get to the point where you take someone who's disadvantaged and provide them with a mansion and air conditioning and color television in every room and all that sort of thing. It'd be nice to do that, but we just can't. So we've got to find the median, the mini-max, where we are taking care of those who need to be taken care of, and we have efficient programs.
4 panels addressed the senator. One panelist was the acting commissioner of the State Department of Pensions and Securities, Rebecca Beasley. She says the Congress and President have acted very responsibly, but she cautioned Denton to act with compassion when recommending which programs to cut. But other panelists say quit blaming the people. They say welfare recipients are not only fighting poverty, but also the stereotypes of all recipients as lazy and unintelligent. Tom Foreman, WSFA TV News.
The governor told reporters that the mental health system is no longer in a distressed situation, listing 3 important changes that have taken place: major appropriations for capital improvements, the correction of operational details, and positive steps in staffing requirements.
Since becoming governor of Alabama in 1979, it has always been my desire to see that proper care is provided for those individuals for whom the state is responsible. Under Commissioner Ireland, these goals have been met. It is now time to have Alabama's Department of Mental Health return to its rightful home as a vital part of Alabama state government.
Governor James expressed appreciation to Mental Health Commissioner Glenn Ireland and to members of the legislature.
It's not a cabinet position.
The governor says he doesn't know what the court will do in response to his request to be removed as receiver, but he says he's optimistic that once the court reviews the state's performance, it will return control of the system to the state. Dan Black, WSFA TV News.
The investigation is now at the paper chase segment involving the review of parole records of 6,000 inmates released over the last 3 years.
We're right now trying to manage a tremendous paper load that we've got. We're talking somewhere in the neighborhood, well, we're talking about thousands of files. We've got to control the paperwork.
TV 12 News has learned that the investigative team has uncovered allegations of another parole buy, allegedly involving a former Department of Corrections official. My sources say a $2,500 bribe was accepted by the man 4 days before Andrew Cooper allegedly accepted a $3,000 bribe in exchange for parole. Cooper faces trial on the charges September 23rd. The parole scam probe has uncovered many present and past alleged illegalities involving parole buying. One scheme allegedly took place in the state capitol.
This brown paper bag filled with cash in this room on the first floor of the state capitol played a major role in pardon and parole buying in the 1940s and 50s. Former officials who were with the state of Alabama and attorneys who practiced before the state pardon and parole board said the payoffs were made here in the bathroom and the money was always placed in a brown paper bag. As soon as the money changed hands, the official would leave, and a few months later, the inmate would receive a pardon or parole.
So far in the present investigation, 43-year-old Andrew Cooper is thought by investigators to be a key link between Corrections Board personnel believed to be involved in parole scam and members of the State Pardons and Parole Board. But Cooper has refused to disclose what he knows. This is Norman Lumpkin, WSFA TV News reporting.
During the public hearing on the budget, local firemen asked for an increase in pay over the proposed $400 a year base pay raise, the $180 increase in hazardous duty pay, and other benefits. President of the local firefighters union, Glenn Foshee, noted that firefighters in some other cities throughout the state are getting more money than Montgomery firefighters. He suggested that the city impose a 2-cent tax on lodging, which would add up to $260,000. That could mean a 1% across-the-board raise for all city employees. But Councilmember Alice Reynolds objected, saying Montgomery already has one of the highest taxes on lodging in the state, and hotel and motel owners recently polled are strongly opposed to any increase. When the budget came before the council for a vote, there were several attempts to amend the original proposal, but no attempt was made to further increase the employees' salaries. The council finally approved the proposed budget by adding $22,000, with Community Action getting $13,000, the County Department of Pensions and Securities an additional